Committee will come to order. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Alvarado,
Here.
Senator Yates, Representative Bridges,
Here.
Representative Fraser Gordon,
Here.
Representative Marzian, Senator West.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First matter of business is approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
Second.
There is a correction to the attendance. I didn't scroll down far enough. Representative Hale, are you here?
I think so.
All right.
So I'm here.
Do I have a motion for approval as corrected? A motion and a second. Immediately into the next matter of business, and I don't know, frankly, I don't know what this committee is going to do as far as getting a motion for approval anymore, because this person will be leaving us, but I would like to take this opportunity to recognize Representative Marzian. She's retiring from the General Assembly after 29 years of service. You couldn't make it one more year, you know. Including 8 years on this particular committee. And to commemorate her service, we have a legislative citation that we will read at this time. So if staff would go ahead and read that citation, please.
State Representative Mary Lou Marzian is recognized and honored upon the auspicious occasion of her retirement from the Kentucky General Assembly, following nearly 3 decades of distinguished service to the members of this body and the citizens of the Commonwealth. Elected to her current post in 1994, Representative Marzian has consistently served the citizens of House District 34 with the utmost integrity and distinction, earning a stellar reputation over the years for her unfailing compassion, veracity, and determination. In addition to serving as a vital member of many worthwhile committees, through which she has worked tirelessly to better the lives and circumstances of all Kentuckians, she served most ably as co-chair of the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee from July 2014 until December 2016, providing exceptional leadership in a fair and even-handed manner, and always with the overall goal that all people and all points of view should be heard. A public servant of the highest caliber, Representative Mary Lou Marzian is offered sincere commendation and gratitude for having labored with such tremendous warmth, wisdom, and perseverance on behalf of this worthwhile subcommittee, and in the interest of all citizens of the Commonwealth is extended best wishes for the utmost success and good fortune in all of her.
Thank you so much. Representative, would you like to say a few words?
Oh, yes, thank you so much. That's very sweet, and I just don't have a whole lot to say, but I've really enjoyed being on this committee, and I've learned so much, and I'm going to miss everybody, so thank you.
Thank you for your service to this committee and to the General Assembly. We really appreciate that. Senator Alvarado, we don't have a citation for you.
I haven't even been on this committee for a year.
Would you like to say a few words? I honestly don't know if this will be your last meeting or not.
Yeah, it may be actually for committee unless we do something the first few days of session. So I'll be here for the first week of session.
Okay.
But it's been an honor really to serve on this committee. This is always one that cross-sects between executive legislative branch, I think. It's always a check and balance committee, so I appreciate having been on this. And it's been an honor to get to know everybody here on this committee, and an honor to serve in the General Assembly, and looking forward to kind of new adventures ahead. So I won't bore the committee with all the details of how things came about, but happy if anybody wants a little bit of information about it, I'd be happy to tell them how things come up, but I'm looking forward to it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Good luck to both of you in your future endeavors. Back to business. Please call the first regulation.
Education and Labor Cabinet, Office of Adult Education, 13 KAR 3050 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation is being amended to update the name of the agency and add a class of person eligible to take the GED exam. The staff suggested amendment amends Section 2 to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
John Gregory, Executive Director, the Office of Adult Education.
Dondra Meredith, Deputy General Counsel, Education and Labor Cabinet.
Thank you so much. We have a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. Are there any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Personnel Cabinet, 101 KAR 2, 210 Emergency and Ordinary.
101, 2210, and emergency, amend the Public Employee Health Insurance Program to update to the 2023 plan year.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Chris Chamness, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Employee Insurance, Personnel Cabinet.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval? The committee will stand at ease. I apologize. There are no amendments. Didn't mean to catch you off guard there.
Appreciate that.
There are no amendments. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, let's see. I had a question, but that's been answered. I have no questions. Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance and Administration Cabinet, Kentucky Infrastructure Authority, 200 KAR 17, 111 Emergency and Ordinary. The Ordinary has a staff suggested amendment.
These regulations establish procedures for the Kentucky Infrastructure Drinking Water and Wastewater Grant Program. The staff suggested amendment for 111 Ordinary amends various sections to clarify various provisions and comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Chairman West. I'm Sandy Williams, Executive Director with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority.
Matthew Stevens, General Counsel for Department for Local Government.
Thank you. If you could pull your mic a little closer there, make sure the green light's on.
It is. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was more concerned with her, but there's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? We have a motion and a second without objection, so ordered. Before everyone else may have a question, I've got a question. Just go into some detail for us. This is this is a new fee, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just explain to us what you're doing, what the fee looks like, how this will work on the ground.
Certainly. Thank you, sir. So I'm sure, as you are aware, the Drinking Water and Wastewater Grant Program, also known as the Cleaner Water Program, was funded with $500 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund, appropriated with $250 million in each of the 21 and 22 regular sessions of the General Assembly. So with that $500 million in funding, KIA is administering 810 grants. We're not bored. And that grant administration consists of sending commitment letters, preparing executive summaries of each grant, and presenting that information to the Capital Projects and Bond Oversight Committee, tracking engineering procurement, Division of Water project approvals, state clearinghouse submittals, and making sure that each project is procured following KRS 45A, just to name a few of the administration on the tasks under administering those grants. Also, because it's federal funds, on the reporting side, we have to prepare and submit quarterly reporting for each grantee based on the grantee's unique entity identifier, or UEI number, and have to provide to U.S. Treasury the amount and type of funding dispersed during each quarter by UEI number and the physical location of each project. We have 4.5 FTEs dedicated to the administration and reporting of the program, and we anticipate the program to run through December 31st, 2026. So the fee is 0.5%, and that will be charged to each grantee as a part of their grant administration, and will be used to fund
Administration.
the administration. Yes, sir.
the bill number escapes me. I'm sorry, whatever bill we passed to set this up. So did we put anything in there for administration in either the bill or the budget?
Yes, $75,000 for administration for each $250 million appropriation.
Okay. So,
And I said 1,000, right? 75,000?
yeah, that's what we show as well. So you're in effect telling us the KIA believes that 75,000 is inadequate to meet the requirements and to take care of administering the grants, and so you're asking for this fee. Do we have? Is it your? Obviously, it's your opinion, but is it your opinion we have good authority within KRS to request this fee?
That is my understanding.
Okay, so your opinion, we have good legal authority to do that. I don't have any further questions. Do any other members have questions about this? I'm not going to say anything more. You know, we're getting into session, so obviously if we have a problem, we'll be back in session. We can look at it then, but I know you have a lot of work to do. Representative Bridges has a question.
Just one, so if you can help me understand, how did you come about with these numbers? I mean, was there any kind of physical impact statement you ran on this to suggest that the 75,000 is inadequate and you need more? Or do you have any documentation, any kind of thing you can send to us so that we can review it? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. So it would be to pay the salaries for 4.5 FTEs between now and the end of 2026.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Commonwealth Office of Technology, 200 KAR 41010 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation establishes the framework through which the Kentucky State Plane Coordinate System will be defined in accordance with KRS 1020. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to add a statutory citation, comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and make technical changes.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
My name is Brian Thomas. I'm General Counsel of the Finance Administration Cabinet.
Gary Bishop, Assistant General Counsel, Finance Administration Cabinet.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions from members of the committee on this regulation? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Social Work, 201 KAR 23016 emergency. This does not have additional.
201 KR 23016E establishes requirements to address the shortage of social work professionals in Kentucky by granting a temporary permit to engage in the practice of social work for individuals that meet the appropriate educational requirements to practice social work or under the appropriate supervision of a licensed clinical social worker, and which lasts until when they are able to obtain licensure.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Mark Kelly, Executive Director of the Kentucky Board of Social Work.
Thank you. There are no amendments to this regulation. We have any questions or statements on this regulation? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, one moment. Yes.
I was just curious as to, it's filed as an emergency. If you could explain why it was filed as an emergency and not as a regular reg.
We have 47 temporary permits in the state of Kentucky, and with the regulation expired, that would have put those social workers' temporary license in danger. So we wanted to do the emergency reg so that they could retain their temporary licensure until we could do the ordinary reg.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Department of Tourism, 300 KAR 1021 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation establishes the distribution process of the tourism recovery and investment funds appropriated by the General Assembly during the 2022 regular session from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and extends the application deadlines to accommodate those impacted by the flooding in eastern Kentucky. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and make technical changes.
Thank you. Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Sarah Cronin, General Counsel for the Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet.
Hello, Mona Jewett, Deputy Commissioner with the Kentucky Department of Tourism.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second without objection is so ordered. Any questions for these ladies and Co-Chair Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really have a question as to what's happening here, but could you just real quickly explain how that process is going to work?
Sure, I'd be happy to. During the previous legislative session, you and the governor so kindly awarded our department $60 million to disperse out to the destination marketing organizations around the state. And that fund was divided into 3 tranches of money. The first tranche of that was to go directly to these DMOs to do marketing. The second tranche was to go out to these DMOs to support the meetings and conventions industry. And the third was to go to multi-jurisdictions, which means 5 or more counties needed to pull together with their DMOs to apply and get money to do marketing. We have completed the process for the first 2 tranches and actually went through the final tranche yesterday and scored those applications. So that's kind of where we are in process. Does that answer your question?
It does. And if I just can follow up with one more, Mr. Chair. So that was divided equally in 3?
It was not. It was not. So the first tranche was $25 million to the DMOs for marketing. The second tranche was $25 million to the DMOs for meetings and conventions. And the third tranche was $10 million for the multi-jurisdiction marketing.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate
You're
that
welcome.
answer. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, so refresh my memory, we, in appropriations and revenue, I thought we had appropriated $75 million.
That's correct.
Is that correct? And
Yes.
you just said $60 million. Where did the other 15 go?
$15 million was appropriated directly to our department to
Gotcha.
do marketing, statewide
Okay.
marketing, and the
Gotcha.
$60 million was to go to the DMOs.
Gotcha. So the 15 was off the top before it went down in the appropriation. Gotcha.
Yes.
Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 2 185 and 225 with staff suggested amendments, and 301 KAR 251.
301 to 185 amends hunter education requirements to allow hunters to demonstrate compliance by means other than carrying a physical card, provide for in-person and online hunter education, and exempt former members of the armed forces and certified peace officers from live fire requirements. The staff suggested amendments amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. 301 to 225 amends bird hunting requirements to update definitions, establish 2 Canada goose zones for hunting in September, and establish mentored hunters' hunts. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A and adds Section 10 to incorporate the dove quota post-hunt hunter survey by reference. 301 to 251 amends hunting and trapping seasons to extend the season for hunting coyote at night and update coyote hunting at night to include using modern firearms and lights.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Hi, Jenny Gilbert, Legislative Liaison for the Commissioner's Office of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources.
Thank you so much. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Without objection, is so ordered. I believe Co-Chair Hale has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't hardly ever pass up a chance to ask a question to Fish and Wildlife. Thank you for being here today. I certainly have no issues with any of the regs that's here, except it does just bring up a memory of a few years ago when our esteemed colleague, Representative Turner was here, and this was a question that stirred up a lot of debate one day about the being able to take your hunter education, the live fire online.
Yes, sir.
And I can never forget his comments that day. But just make sure this still requires the individual to do this in the field with somebody, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And there's several places within our reg and different hunting regs that mention that requirement as well. So we reiterate that often.
And again, thank you, and the regs are fine. I read them thoroughly, but I just wanted to make that point. But
yes.
Thank you very
yes.
much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Any other questions for members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, Kentucky State Corrections Commission. 500 KAR 10-001, 020, 030, and 040. The last has a staff suggested amendment.
510-001 amends to add definitions. 020 amends to require a detailed proposed budget summary, to update timeframes, and to add a procedure for requesting reconsideration. 030 amends to add the Commission's website and revise the grant award modification process. 040 amends to add a section for program and fiscal reports, add options for an administrator when a program or facility is not in compliance, to add requirements for notification of suspension in a correction plan, and add a section for termination of a grant program. The staff suggested amendment for 040 amends Section 2 to clarify record retention requirements and various sections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Cindy Huddleston, Kentucky Department of Corrections.
Seth Vaughns, Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, Office of Legal Services.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department of Corrections, 501 KAR 6080 and 130, both with staff suggested amendment.
501-6080 amends the department's religion reference manual to add additional religions, to include a procedure to request a religious item or practice that is not included in the manual, and to reorganize and clarify provisions. 501-6130 amends to update the policies and procedures of the Western Kentucky Correctional Complex. The staff suggested amendments amend various sections for clarity and consistency, to update cross-references, and comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Amy Barker, here for the Department of Corrections.
Brandon Lynch, Kentucky Department of Corrections.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Do we have a motion on staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. I've got a question on the manual. My understanding is, as far as the religious part of the manual, it's not really specific. Could you explain real quickly what new items are going to be in the manual?
Several things have been added. The biggest portion of the change is a rearrangement. They put things in alphabetical order, so if you look at the dirty copy, it looks like we're striking all these religions, but we're just moving them up. There have been a couple of faiths added where we've had requests from inmates to do something in that faith, so we've added those as we've come across those. That's essentially what we've done here.
Any other questions for members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Department of Criminal Justice Training, 503 KAR 3 130 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation establishes requirements for basic and annual in-service training to be offered electronically and online through remote learning. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with 13A drafting requirements.
Would you please identify yourself for the record again?
Amy Barker, here for Criminal Justice Training.
Patrick Miller, Staff Assistant, Department of Criminal Justice Training.
Thank you so much. We have a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Office of State School Security Marshal, 503 KAR 7010 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation establishes requirements and procedures related to conducting on-site reviews for completion of the school's security risk assessment tool, monitoring school safety, and conducting related training. It also establishes the process for a local board to request written approval from the state school security marshal if sufficient funds and qualified personnel are not available for a school resource officer to be assigned and working on-site full-time at every campus. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to clarify procedures for on-site review of the school security risk assessment, to clarify procedures for closed and locked door exemption applications, and amends various sections to comply with 13A requirements.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Nathan Goins on behalf of the State School Security Marshal.
Is your mic on? Check that real quick.
Yes. Nathan Goins on behalf of the State School Security Marshal.
You have to pull those mics close for some reason. That's fine. Go ahead.
Ben Wilcox, State School Security Marshal.
Thank you. We have a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Without objection, it is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regs? Seeing none, I've got one question where it talks about, setting up the procedures if there's not sufficient funds for SROs. Does that directly conflict with the Safety and Resiliency Act itself if we do that?
I don't think it does. All we've done with that is that within the passing of HB 63, we basically had to set out a survey to all the school districts this summer and had them give us a plan of how many SROs they had, how many SROs they were planning on hiring, and then if they did not have the efficient funds or personnel, and that was the reason why they couldn't fulfill that mandate, that they sent that back to us, and we were able to send them basically written approval knowing that they had sent that information to us. So I don't know if that directly conflicts.
It does. So that's, I can't remember specifically in that portion of the bill. Mm-hmm. We make the requirement so many SROs per.
One per campus, yes, sir.
One per campus, and but I didn't remember the provision on the back. But this is you have authority within that bill to do exactly
correct.
What you're doing. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Co-Chair Hale has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this may not exactly be related to the exact definition of this reg, but could you please tell me what jurisdiction the SROs have off campus?
It really depends on who's employing the SRO and how they're employed. There's three different ways that you can have an SRO on campus. The first is if the school district is in working with a outside agency like a sheriff's office or a police department, and of course that officer has the same jurisdiction they would have working the street. They're just assigned to the actual school. The school can also hire a SLEO, or a special law enforcement officer, that they derive their powers from a special commission, and they would only have arrest powers and powers within the school district unless they had some type of memorandum of understanding with the outside agency where that school is located. Of course, with the passing of HB 63, the school can start their own police department, and that gives a little bit more latitude to the officers than just the SLEO officers, because they just have a little bit more jurisdiction of around the area, and of course they also can have more jurisdiction if it's a school-owned bus or something like that, where they'd have to go out and do an investigation if they were off property. So really, that to answer that question, it'd be depending on how they are employed and how they are gaining their actual law enforcement powers.
If I can just follow up, and I think I understand, and I think I'm following you. But if for instance they were to be on, say, a piece of property that the school owned, say maybe a superintendent or a board office or something of that nature, would their authority be there just as it would be on the school grounds itself?
For my understanding, yes. If it's school-owned property, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Education and Labor Cabinet, Board of Education, 701 KAR 8010 emergency, 020 emergency, 030 emergency, 040 emergency, 050 emergency. None of those have additional amendments. Under Office of Learning Programs Development, we also have 704 KAR 3305 with a staff and agency amendment.
701 8010 emergency, 701 8020 emergency, 701 8030 emergency, 701 8040 emergency, and 701 805 emergency. Establish the public charter school student application, lottery, and enrollment process, the requirements for the competence, performance, and evaluation for charter school authorizers, requirements for the appeals process, requirements for conversion public charter schools, and requirements for the calculation and distribution of funds to a public charter school, the schedule of distribution of the funds, and the fines for failure to timely transfer funds. 704 KAR 3305 is being amended to provide clarity and ensure alignment to the authorizing statute while also providing clarification for schools and districts as they implement the requirements for the early graduation program, resulting in an early graduation certificate and scholarship to be used at a Kentucky public 2-year community and technical college or a Kentucky 4-year public or nonprofit independent institution accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and make technical changes. The agency amendment amends Section 5 to add early graduation requirements in accordance with KRS 158-141.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. Todd Allen, General Counsel for the State Board and Department of Education.
Matt Ross, Executive Advisor, Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. We do. Without objection, so ordered. There's also an agency amendment. Is there any discussion on the agency amendment? Seeing no discussion, is there a motion for approval? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. So we have before us a set of regulations dealing primarily with charter school implementation. Before I start, do we have any other questions from members? Seeing none, is this primarily, these are existing regs that we're just tweaking, or are these regs in response to the, for lack of a better term, the pilot project bill? What's the genesis of the regs, I guess, is the
So,
main.
Senator West, you have 5 before you. 4 of them are amendments to existing regulations. 1 is a new emergency administrative regulation. All of them make amendments to the regulations that are necessary as a result of House Bill 9 for various changes in charter school law. One of them is the pilot project, but that's not exclusively the only change. The one new administrative regulation that's in front of you deals with funding transfers from local school districts to charter schools. That previously wasn't.
To answer
in the
my
law.
question, it's a combination thereof. But
Yes.
yes, gotcha. Okay. I have no further questions. Any further questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Office of Human Resource Management, 900 KAR 1050. This does not have amendments.
This regulation establishes requirements for fingerprint-based state and national criminal background checks for prospective and current frontline child and adult protection employees, timeframes in which background checks must be performed, and processes for when an individual is found to have a disqualifying offense, processes for challenging information, and the rehabilitative review process.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Began. I'm the Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Community-Based Services, and I'm representing the agency for this administrative regulation today as these checks require, or as these regs require, national fingerprint-based background checks for DCBS Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services frontline staff.
Gotcha. Any questions? There are no amendments. Any questions from members? I've got a question, but we're probably going to get, I'll just warn you in advance, this is a rabbit trail. We're going to kind of go down. This reg applies just to DCBS staff. And I've had several complaints about this. So if you could describe this process and then describe the process as it applies to the private entities. how long, those fingerprints are required. What's the time frame that those need to be back so we can get these people on the front lines?
Sure. Okay. Well, it's an automatic system. So results should be received very quickly, but I'll give you a little bit of background. There's another administrative regulation later on the agenda. That's probably what you're referring to, but the two go together. So we're requiring fingerprint-based background checks through national system authorized by the FBI for DCBS staff and for private child caring and child placing employees. So
if you could stop right there for a second.
Sure.
So how would a person do this? Would they go to state police, local state police? Or I'm assuming there's multiple avenues.
There are sites set up throughout the state.
By who?
The Kentucky State Police has a contract with IDEMIA.
Gotcha. Okay.
So just as a little bit stroll down memory lane, the Family First Prevention Services Act, implemented in 2019. Of course, you've heard we were a leader in the country with that. It required fingerprint-based background checks. Again, this is a national check for private child caring staff. These are staff that have intimate access to vulnerable children that have been removed from their homes, likely due to abuse or neglect already. We needed statutory authority to require these checks. The federal law required it, but the FBI will only give us access if it's statutorily required. Senator Alvarado was kind enough to work with us on getting that statute, getting that bill filed, and it was passed by the General Assembly. But, our administration felt like although we're required to go through this process for private staff, we should do the same for DCBS staff, who also may be transporting children. So that's what you see here today. We weren't federally required to do this, but it was included in Senate Bill 40 as well. So kind of parallel. Same checks will be required for DCBS frontline staff as it is for private agency staff.
So what is your experience with these private entities? How quickly are they getting back the fingerprint, the check, once it's completed? What's a normal time frame on that?
Within 3 days, they should.
Within 3 days.
Now, if there's a disqualifying offense, it could take longer. It will be manually checked. But if there are no red flags, it should be very quick.
So it should be, theoretically, it should be 3 days. And if it's 3 to 4 weeks, then that's a serious problem. Right?
Sure, and they could always contact the department with any hang-ups, and we have access to the same system that they will have access. So we actually have a help center in the cabinet if there are any issues.
Possibly speed up the process.
Sure, or see what may be delaying it.
Okay. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Department for Public Health Vital Statistics 901 KAR 5120 with staff suggested amendment. Also 130 and 140. Continuing under Local Health Departments 902 KAR 8160 with staff suggested amendment.
901 KAR 5120 amends reporting forms to include additional required data elements in accordance with House Bill 3. The staff suggested amendment amends Section 5 and the report of abortion form to add additional data elements required by House Bill 3, and amends various sections to update cross-references, use statutory terminology, and comply with 13A drafting requirements. 901 KAR 5130 establishes the process for requesting a certificate of abortion, also the certificate worksheet form, and a $15 fee for the search and certification of abortion certificates. 901 KAR 5140 establishes the process to request a permit to transport fetal remains in the permit request form.
902 KR 8160 amends to clarify the complaint process that the local health department is required to provide to the recipient of a United States Department of Agriculture funding programs when they believe their civil rights have been violated, and clarify that grievances related to employment are to be filed in accordance with the agency's personnel procedures. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Julie Brooks, Regulations Coordinator, Department for Public Health.
Yeah, thank you. Wesley Duke, General Counsel, Cabinet for Health and Family Services.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval? We have a motion, a second. A motion and a second without objection is so ordered. Any questions from members? This set of regs. I got more of a question / statement. So, in case you didn't notice, abortion's been in the news lately. That's a slight understatement. Just briefly tell us what these regs are doing. This is more for information than anything else. I really have no question, but just if you could go through and briefly, just bullet point, tell us what's happening here.
Sure. The 5120, the reporting form that was incorporated, had to be amended to include the data elements that were required by House Bill 3. So we've just made changes to be able to comply with that. Then the certificate of abortion, we drafted that regulation to keep that process separate from the current birth certificate process. And then the transport of fetal remains regulation is just required so that we can assure that any human remains that are transported have the proper permit.
Gotcha. So on the certificate of abortion, where will that be housed and how long? Do we know that?
It will be housed in the Office of Vital Statistics. They certify all births, and they will establish a similar process when there's a request for a certificate of abortion, and they will house it.
What is that?
I don't know that we figured out how long they will
Well,
keep them.
right, here's where I'm going with that. So I just assumed, I didn't know. I assume we're required to keep a birth certificate for eternity.
Yeah.
Is the certificate of abortion, is it theoretically going to be the same as I would assume it would be?
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, there'll be no differentiation there. It will be kept in line with all the other certificates.
Gotcha. I have no further questions. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Office of Inspector General, 902 KAR 20-365 and 906 KAR 1-210, both with staff suggested amendments.
902-2365 establishes requirements for the Kentucky Abortion-Inducing Drug Certification Program, including registration requirements for physicians. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with 13A drafting and formatting requirements.
906 KR 1210 establishes pursuant to House Bill 282 from the 2022 regular session requirements for health care services registration and quarterly reporting, including to establish an initial and annual registration fee of $3,000 pursuant to statute, establish a $25 processing fee for a name change, establish a $100 processing fee for change of location, require health services agencies to carry professional and general liability insurance and an employee dishonesty bond of $10,000, include a link to where a complaint information document is available for download, establish provisions for denial, expiration, revocation, and fines, including a fine of $25,000 for noncompliance, establish provisions for notice of adverse action, closure of a health care services agency, and appeals, and incorporate by reference an application for registration to operate a health care services agency and a quarterly report form. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Sure. Adam Mather, Inspector General.
Kara Daniel, Deputy Inspector General.
Thank you so much. We have staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion and a second without objection. It is so ordered. Any questions from members on these regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Department for Medicaid Services, 907 KAR 1065, 082 with an agency and staff suggested amendment, and 907 KAR 3160 emergency.
907-1065 amends to incorporate the $29 pandemic reimbursement increase and to clarify how this additional funding will be reflected in future nursing facility rates.
907-1082 amends Medicaid coverage related to rural health clinic services. To revise definitions and expand behavioral services, the amended after comments version adds to the list of vaccines that a rural health clinic shall provide if requested by a recipient. Vaccine that is recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. The agency amendment adds to the definition for approved behavioral health practitioner under supervision to include a behavioral health associate as permissible pursuant to 907 KAR Chapter 15 and makes technical corrections.
907 KR 3160E amends to add changes made by the 2022 regular session Senate Bill 8, including to define new terms to modernize behavioral health treatment and providers, change the previous term of a child sex abuse medical examination to a child medical evaluation, allow for investigation of physical abuse and neglect by children's advocacy centers, allow new provider types of physician assistants, advanced practice registered nurses, and sexual assault nurse examiners to provide services within these facilities, expand concept of a child medical evaluation to include a Children's Advocacy Centers of Kentucky approved evidence-based trauma screening, introduce 9 ongoing outpatient behavioral health services, expand payment methodology of a child medical evaluation to meet Senate Bill 8's requirement of paying the true and actual cost of the child advocacy centers and specialized children's services clinics, include 2 reimbursement sections, utilize an enhanced fee schedule or in the alternative and at the option of the Child Advocacy Center during the implementation phase an updated comprehensive rate that could be billed, implement a prospective payment system rate reimbursement, require managed care organizations to utilize the cost reports and cost surveys developed and implemented by DMS in consultation with child advocacy centers, include additional requirements and standards for laboratory services, and reserve the ability to completely remove this benefit and provider type from managed care in order to lessen the administrative burden.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Scott, Regulatory and Legislative Advisor for DMS.
Thank you so much. Before we get into any questions, we have 3 distinct and separate regs. Are you going to request a deferral?
That is correct.
I would go ahead and do that if.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to request a deferral of 907 KR 1082 and all associated amendments.
Thank you. I don't have to make that motion then. So the motion is on the table for a deferral of 907 KR 001082 and all related amendments. I'll make the motion. Do we have a second? We have a second on that. Without objection, it is so ordered. So we have officially taken out that reg, and we are left with the two regs. Any questions on the remaining regs? I have one question, and this is very important to our nursing facilities. So just briefly go into the new rate. If you can tell us approximately maybe what it is, is it a big increase, or and how long will it last?
Well, we're just bringing that $29 reimbursement that's been around for a couple of years with the last couple of budgets. We're bringing that into their base rate. In the future, we're going to do that. So it's
we're
just
building it into the base.
Right.
Gotcha.
We're making it permanent.
Gotcha. Senator Alvarado.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's an increase that's needed desperately by a lot of these facilities, but overall it's not really a large amount, although it's a budgetary hit, but I think it's we need more than the $29 in these facilities, really. But it's something I think if it was withdrawn back, I think a lot of our facilities are that precarious, it would put them under. So this is needed.
That's kind of the information I was looking for, Senator Alvarado, is and I know you would practice in this area all the time. So going into the session and the budget year, following year, we may need to review that again and increase that a little bit more. But at least we'll have this as the base for the next year or so. Any further questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Department for Community-Based Services, 921 KAR 2, 016, 17, 35, 40, 50, 60, which has an agency amendment, 370, 922 KAR 1, 290 with staff suggested amendment, and 922 KAR 1, 350 with an agency amendment.
921 KR 2016 amends to increase resource limits, payment maximums, maximum gross income limits, and standard of need values, incorporate a cost of living adjustment, add balances in a 529 or ABLE account to the list of excluded resources, and update terminology. 921 KR 2 17, 35, 40, and 50 include updates to program names. 921 KR 2017 amends to modernize language consistent with other regulations in process. Update financial assistance amounts provided to individuals who have needs relating to transportation, vehicle repairs and fees, and update the total cost of items and support services in a form incorporated by reference. 921 KR 2035 amends to include changes in service delivery by including online application options. Update the federal citation associated with voter registration, and update the non-discrimination statement in accordance with federal rules. 921 KR 2040 amends to update forms and prohibit utilization of an electronic benefits transfer card at specific retailers outlined in House Bill 7 of the 2022 regular session. 921 KR 2050 amends to establish provisions relating to the recoupment of benefits and prospective pays required by House Bill 7 and update material incorporated by reference. 921 KR 2060 amends to update state government employee classification titles, make minor revisions to incorporate material related to anti-discriminatory language, and make KRS Chapter 13A changes. The agency amendment amends Section 4 and the material incorporated by reference to add the signed payee's title, add the notary's ID number, update the revision date, and make minor technical corrections. 921 KR 2370 amends to update definitions and provisions related to discrimination consistent with state and federal law and update material incorporated by reference.
922-1290 establishes requirements for fingerprint-based state and national criminal background checks for prospective and current private child caring and child placing staff members, reporting requirements and appeals process, and fees for those procuring background checks. The staff suggested amendment amends Section 5 to comply with the formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and make technical changes. 922-1350 is being amended to update for consistency with KRS 199-660 and other administrative regulations. The agency amendment amends Section 20 to add provisions pertaining to maintenance of foster care home records.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Began. I'm the Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Community-Based Services.
Good afternoon. I'm Todd Trapp. I'm the Director of the Department, the Division of Family Support within the Department for Community-Based Services.
Thank you so much. We have a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second without objection, so ordered. There's also an agency amendment. Do we have any discussion on the agency amendment first? Seeing none. Is there a motion and a second? We have a motion and a second without objection. It's so ordered. So we have before us all these regs as amended with staff and agency amendments. I'm going to ask a question to start with for Mrs. Began, just to clarify what we stated earlier.
Yes, sir.
Is it your opinion that once these go through, that it should clarify and help if there is some type of problem with fingerprint timeframes and things of that nature?
Yes, sir. There should be no issues, but of course we meet with our private partners regularly, and as I mentioned, we do have a help desk if there are any concerns.
Okay, thank you. Co-Chair Hale has a question or a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Began, thank you. I know last month in our November meeting we had a set of regulations that we had asked for you to defer, and you graciously did that for us. And then I actually, when the regulations came back, I asked the staff if they would contact you again or the agency and ask for a deferral again due to the holiday period. And I just think we didn't really have time to look into these the way we wanted to. And I appreciate you doing that. But actually, I had a fault. I missed one. And it was, and I was going to include that in the group that I had asked you to defer earlier before the meeting today, and it was KAR 002016. And so that was one that was in the group that I was asking. And so my question is, and staff has told me that the amendments do not apply to that specific reg. Am I correct in that? That is correct. And what I'm asking, could we ask for, or I'm asking, would you be willing to defer that one specific reg? And that's the only one.
Well, sir, I know that someone drove a long way to be here today to speak on that regulation.
Let's stop right there. And I hadn't gotten that far yet, Co-Chair Hale, but we do have two people signed up to speak in favor of. So let's take a time out and let them speak, and then we'll circle back. So I have on my sheet here, I've got Dustin Pugel and I've got Norma Hatfield to speak. I believe they're here to speak in favor. If you would, whenever you get seated, if you would identify yourself for the record, and then the floor is yours.
We're debating on who goes first here.
I'll let you all figure that out.
My name is Dustin Pugel. I'm the policy director at the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, and I'll be very brief. And I actually wanted to speak specifically to 016. This is a reg that we are really excited to see come forward. It's a long overdue increase to the benefit level and the income eligibility limit for KTAP. The last time this amount was increased was 1995 when I was 8 years old in Miss Lauder's class in Wilmore Elementary School. So I think this is a really important step forward. We know from a lot of research that basic cash assistance and near cash assistance has for decades had an incredible benefit to kids socially, emotionally, in their careers later in life, and even with their health. And so this update really brings us in line with the median state in the country. Nearby states like Ohio, Illinois, West Virginia, and Tennessee have recently increased their benefit levels. And so this really brings us from 1995 to 2022 in a way that I think is long overdue and badly needed. And so I'm excited that you all are reviewing it, and I really urge you to move ahead with it.
I'm Norma Hatfield. I'm a grandmother who's raising 2 grandkids. I have been for the past year and past 8 years, and I still am for a few more years to go. I'm also president of the Kinship Families Coalition of Kentucky. I'm going to ask you to bear with me. I actually had some letters from some other families, and I've got a few quotes, and I want to make sure I get it right, but I promise I'll be fast. I'm in support of this regulation change because there are a lot of different consumers, if you will, of the KTAP program. And I just want to make sure everybody's thinking about all the different perspectives that are out there. And specifically, I'm going to talk about kinship families and kinship kids. Across the nation, there are 2.6 million children that are living with relatives other than their biological parents. Today in Kentucky, out of that 2.6 million, there are 96,000 kids that are also living with relatives without their biological parents. That's 96,000 kids in Kentucky. And that is the highest rate in the nation. Now, as a reference point, when I first started speaking out on behalf of kinship families, I did an interview in February of 2016. And at that particular time, the number of kids that were living with family other than their parents was 59,000. And that was also the highest rate back then in the nation. So the numbers continue to climb. In 6 years, we've grown 37,000 kids that are living with relatives other than their parents, and that's an increase of about 6,167 children in a span a year in this period. And to me, that's very alarming. Now, combine that with the fact that we've ranked number 1 for several years on abuse and neglect compared to other states, and that right now we're in the top 5. There are a lot of issues in Kentucky regarding kids. Now, I don't believe that this particular regulation fixes all of that, but this is certainly one step towards making things a little bit better for these kids. Because caregivers, kinship family caregivers, are keeping the kids out of foster care. And we don't have enough foster homes today, and kids just do better when they're with family. But those caregivers need support. They need support services for those kids. And I'm grateful that the cabinet sees that and is making that proposal, and I'm asking for you all to think about the same thing to make that happen. Now, I did a petition back in 2016 and 2017 in support of the reinstatement of the old kinship care program, and that ended in the spring of 2013. That program provided monetary assistance to relatives, not the biological parents, that were raising kids that they took in for a variety of different reasons. They were caregivers such as aunts, uncles, cousins, older siblings, but most often they were grandparents and great-grandparents. Now, this program back then, it provided $10 a day for the care of a child, and it was about $300 a month. And of course, that ended in 2013. But from what I understand, this program, that money, that actually came from KTAP or TANF dollars. Now, for the families that reached out and shared their stories back then, because many of them don't have a lot of services. They don't qualify for the foster care options and the things that are out there today. But out of the hundreds to thousands that did write their story and tell their struggles, they were looking for some type of additional assistance. And I just kind of wanted to just briefly kind of go over some of that. I had a letter from one grandmother, and her name was Liz. And what she wrote was, she said, I was in absolute shock to discover that my grandson was born prematurely, weighing only 4 pounds and 9 ounces and addicted to heroin. He was in the hospital for 18 days. Now, later, she talks about how her grandson had moderately severe hearing loss, development delays, had development therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and that was in the first 16 months. There were many, many appointments, and she had to quit her job. She was working. She was single, a single grandmother, and she was working, but then this came along, and she had to put her priorities with her family, and she kept her grandson out of foster care. Now, another grandmother named Angie, she shared that she recently got custody, now this is a couple of years ago, of four step-grandchildren, and she shared that her husband had to quit his job to help with caring for these kids, and she said, we receive KTAP on 3 children, which totals $262 per month. This is supposed to cover diapers, clothes, car seats, food, because we don't qualify for food stamps. Now, don't get me wrong, I am grateful for the help that I get, but it is nowhere near the cost of raising these kids, and the breakout is jaw-dropping. It seems the more children I get, the more the KTAP assistance goes down. And then later she says, the state has let her take on a financial burden with no consideration to what they would give up or will have to give up, and we have to financially figure it out. But then what? I guess when you think about kinship caregivers and you think about their stories, and I had hundreds of these, the petition actually had 5,000 to 6,000 people asking for some type of service for caregivers. And you think about the trauma that the children have suffered and the requirements within the system that often leads to a job loss for a lot of these families. KTAP is their option. A legislator, when we did House Bill 1 a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about how, kinship caregivers are going to have foster pay. Everything's going to be all wonderful. And then a legislator said, well, if you don't have that foster kinship, then you've got KTAP. but we know how low KTAP is. I mean, I believe that you have to qualify for this. These families are at 25% of the poverty level. These are not people that are living really high on the hog and then still asking for additional help. These are families, and often these grandparents, they've already worked their whole life. They've already done their part in society, but now they're stepping up and they're taking in sometimes sibling groups of 4 or 5 kids while they're single and living on disability, and we're pointing them to KTAP. But the numbers for KTAP just don't quite cut it. Now, I jotted down in here, I'm not following my little script, but we're looking at 186 if you have 1 child, and then it was 200 to get for 2. It took 4 kids, it takes today 4 kids to even reach to $300. And what the cabinet is proposing is to increase that amount. I mean, we haven't had a change in KTAP since 1995. We're not even looking at the economic changes, inflation. We're not in the 21st century. And we really need to make some change. I mean, when you think about these families that are doing the best that they can, these are not the people that are misusing the system. These are the people that need some help with the system while they're taking care of the kids in Kentucky so that they can have the very, very basics. And so I just want to ask you, please, to support this proposal.
Thank you so much for the presentation. If you guys would just stay there for a second, if you don't mind the cabinet, if you could maybe grab you another chair and just, I would say, hop back up there. I think we got a few questions. I'll start us out. Do we have a fiscal note or fiscal impact statement on this reg, what it will cost the state?
I don't believe we have projected exactly. We know that participation has declined dramatically, and I don't believe we have projected exactly.
We don't have, okay.
Again, this is all federal funds, and it's funding that we receive annually.
Okay, so you just added a question for me.
Okay.
So what is the current maximum gross income, and then what would we go to?
One moment, please.
It's complicated because there's income and there's
And
standard
there are
of
tiers,
need.
right? There are different tiers, right? Is that
Right. Let's see, this is benefits.
A little bit about the calculation.
Yes. So the current gross income per household size of 1 is $742, and the proposed is $890. That's for a household size of 1. And then the
so it's not like in a lot of instances, it's not a percentage. It's a number. Okay, gotcha. So it's not like 100% of poverty. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. These dollar amounts were set back in the 90s, and they have not been updated by a penny since then. So KTAP is different from, like you're saying, most programs where they work off of a percent of the federal poverty level. This is a standard of need that's a set dollar amount, and that's what they're hoping to increase by about 20%.
So the maximum gross income number we're talking about is a set number.
That's correct.
And there's no, inflation.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
So it
Okay.
has both the eligibility limit and the benefit amount have both dropped by almost 50% since the 90s.
And isn't that pretty unusual to?
It's extremely unusual.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all the questions I had. Co-Chair Hale, I believe, has a question.
Thank you very much. I certainly want to go on the record of saying I'm not trying to stop this regulation. We're not attempting to stop the regulation. When you say to us that there hasn't been an increase since 1995, that's certainly kind of almost mind-boggling that there hasn't been an increase. What's that, 27 years ago? The only thing, again, I'm not proposing to stop the regulation. I'm just asking, we're going to be back in session in 3 weeks, less than a month. I would just ask if we could just kind of maybe wrap our heads around this one reg right here is the only one.
Well, sir, we would be happy to meet with anyone before it goes to a second committee. You know, we have over a month at least before it does that, and we've offered to meet and discuss these, and that continues. We are open to making any changes the committee desires, so we would ask that it gets moved forward with the opportunity to meet and discuss before its second review.
Real quick, I'm gonna jump in, co-chair. So health and welfare, is that where this?
Well, it will go to the new Child and Family Services Committee.
Gotcha, new split off. Okay. The committee will stand at ease for 1 second.
Apologies and my fault for not adding that in there. Again, I would ask you to defer that. I'm just going to ask you, would you do that one more time?
I can give you some more information. So we'll be back here January 10th. So we're on schedule for the first. I'm going to allow Representative Marzian to ask a question. She's itching to ask a question right now. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Since this may be your last
It
one.
will be my last one. So I would respectfully ask that we support this reg and let them move on. The amount of money they get is minuscule. And I have been here 3 decades, so I know that there has been no increase. I've followed this very carefully. And it's so important to our children to have family. If the parents are probably unable to take care of the kids, we know there's a huge drug problem throughout Kentucky. I have a dear, dear friend whose daughter died of a drug overdose, and she's got the 2 kids. She's 68 years old, and they're not wealthy. And I don't even know if they have applied for the care or not. But it's just so important because we know many, many placements in foster care. Kids have to go to foster care. There's how many? Average about 21 placements before they're 18, if I remember. Is that about right? Anyway, I think it's so important. We know that there's a huge inflation issue going on in the country. So your $300 if you have 4 kids is not going nearly as far. So I would urge the committee to go ahead and let our families that are taking care of our most precious assets a little bit of an increase. And it is federal money, so it's like play money to us, right? And let me remind the committee, the legislator did vote ourselves a good raise starting in January, so I think it's important that we take care of our most vulnerable kids. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Representative. So that leads me to another question. So let's talk about the federal aspect of it. how in reality does that work? Like once we increase this, do we have a bigger, more of a match, or is that how the state's affected? Or
It does not affect the maintenance of effort, which we do apply towards TANF funding, and we receive about the same amount of TANF funds every year. So,
so whatever increase occurs because of the increases should all be federal money.
It will be, yes, sir.
And so it will, theoretically, it would not affect our general fund.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
Mr.
see
Chairman,
you.
and
Yes, sir.
one other thing to add to this is that in 2016 there were 43,000 folks using KTAP. That doesn't include the kinship care folks, which is on top of that. As of last month, there were under 20,000 folks, only about 3,200 of which were adults. The other 16,000 were kids. So part of the reason we think that this is important to do is because it's led to a precipitous decline in the number of people who can even qualify, let alone who use it. And so moving it forward, I think, helps get that process going.
Co-Chair Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate you being here, and out of respect for you and your passion for this, I have not made a motion for a deferral, and I'm not going to ask for a deferral. So
Thank you, sir.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
Any other question in this segment? Before you leave, I had one thing I want to say.
Yes, sir.
No questions. I would ask this on behalf of the committee, if you all would get with our staff, and it's just to echo what Co-Chair Hale was saying. I don't think there's any intent to hold it up. I think the main issue is, like with the fiscal impact statement, we don't know what that number is. According to what you're telling me, as far as the general fund, that theoretically it should be zero.
Correct.
But we need to make sure of that. And then we need to know what that upper level, we know it's too low now, but what is that new number? We need to do our due diligence and make sure everything's in order. But if you could get with our staff and work on that, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. And we did provide an email recently that kind of clarified some of the questions that came up last month. And our contact information is there, and I'd be happy to meet after the committee or at any time to discuss these regulations. I appreciate your review.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. Seeing no further questions. We're at the end of this regulation segment. We're not at the end of the meeting, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Co-Chair Hale, did you have a statement? We are done. That's the end of all the regulations today. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say this will be my last event of co-chairing this committee. I've enjoyed it for the last 4 years, actually. I don't think I've missed a meeting in those 4 years. And so I just want to say it's been a great honor to serve as the co-chair along with my co-chair from the Senate, Senator West. I have learned a great deal from this committee. When I was asked to serve on this committee in 2019, I had no idea what this committee even did, but have learned a lot since then and have seen the process through the legislative and executive branch. And I want to say to the staff here that has helped me over the last 4 years serving as the co-chair and the chair from the House, you all have been just an incredible group of people to work with. And thank you so much for every time I would call or every time I'd come down to your office to get some information. You were always right there. And so thank you all so much for that. And to my co-chair, Senator West, thank you for the time we've shared. And the new co-chair will be Representative Lewis over here. And I know he's going to do a great job in this role. And Senator Alvarado, I'm going to miss you. And all the people on the committee and Representative Marzian, it's been an honor to work with you these years, and thank you so much. And to the staff, again, thank you all for what you've done, and I appreciate being able to serve here on this as the co-chair for this for the last 4 years. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
You are welcome, and I'm sorry we didn't have a citation for you today. But what are you going to be doing now, co-chair?
I am going to be the
You're-
chair of the State Government Committee.
Yeah, that'll be easy. That'll be easy. Congratulations. It's been a pleasure to serve with you. Absolutely. Gentlemen class act. Really enjoyed you as we work well together
We did.
as co-chairs. And just to reiterate, we do have probably the best staff
Incredible
in
staff.
RC on this
Incredible.
committee. Just very, very ultra professional.
How about let's give the staff
Yeah.
a good hand for.
Do we have any other business to come before the committee?
Our next meeting is scheduled for January 10th, which is after the part 1 at 1 o'clock.
Thank you so much. Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.